Hello and welcome to another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and today's show I'm delighted to be joined by AJ Roberts. For those 6 or 7 of you who haven't heard of him, the reason I had him on the show is because he's had such huge success over a great deal of different areas. So he's world record holder in powerlifting, he's a very successful businessman, he's competed in CrossFit and bodybuilding. He's just one of those people who seems to turn his hand to something and is not instantly successful but understands the tenets of success in there. He's someone who's not afraid of hard work, but he's also someone who seems to have a lot of common sense about him, and he's you'll kind of see that he just kind of runs away with the show. I've had guys that I'm working with right now in the Inner Athlete Performance Camp just say they've listened to it 6 or 7 times already because that's how impressive this guy is. So if you enjoy the show, of course, you can reach out to us and say thank you or say whatever. Just give us some constructive feedback. It would be much appreciated. And also, of course, 2 books. One of them that I'm looking at right now, Intensity Tolerance by myself, and The Impossible Art of Consistency. Both are available on Amazon right now, and I'll probably put a link in the description of this podcast too. So without further ado, here is Mr. AJ Roberts. So AJ, man, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, my pleasure.
Cool. So last time we spoke on the podcast, we finished on a bit of a can of worms, which was talking about psycho-cybernetics, and like you kind of referenced it. And honestly, it took me 3 or 4 months to kind of get around to reading it. But ever since then, it's completely changed my performance, my relationships, my business, everything together is massively changed. So I wanted to kind of start on the subject of visualization and how you've changed that, if at all, since reading Psycho-Cybernetics.
Oh, wow. I've read that book so long ago. I think it just is ingrained in me. What's interesting with visualization is in college, I was asked by the sports psychology department if they could study me and work with me. And the interesting thing with visualization is I've been doing it ever since I was a kid. Right. I have always seen myself, I guess, in the future and seen myself as the person that I have to become and just been that person. So, for a lot of people, there's a lot of wants and maybes and, they maybe have a dream. But for me, it's just the future version of myself. And then I kind of live into it. So visualization has been a part of who I am since I was young. And I always used to have crazy thought processes of, playing in the NBA. And that's how I ended up coming to the United States, was because, as a kid, I had a cousin who came over from America. She was a basketball player in college, and opened my eyes to that. I began playing basketball and seeing there was people who were going to America to play basketball. And so, it was never a question of, is this possible? Other people had achieved it. So for me, it was just, okay, who do I have to become? And so the visualization part, from external and internal, had always been a huge part of me. I would study footage. I became obsessed. And I still do. Whatever I am interested in, whatever I find fascinating, I become obsessed, and I go deep into that. And then I just, visualize who I have to be. And that's really been a key component to my success every step of the way. And every time I've switched or changed gears or transitioned from one thing to the next, the reality is I just become obsessed with whatever the topic or, the thing is, and understand it inside and out. And like I said earlier, if there is someone's already achieved it, or multiple people have already achieved it, then why not me?
Exactly.
The reality is that we're all born with the same intellect, and as we grow, we can learn anything we want to learn. Obviously, for some people, it comes easier than others, right? And there are some people who are at advantages in where they're at in life, but the opportunity is the same for everybody. The books, the mentors, the groups, the places, anything you want to achieve, the opportunity is there. You've just got to choose whether you're going to step up to it or not. I think so many people will say they want something, but even their own self-talk, right? Even their own self-talk doesn't align with what they're saying. And so an example, yesterday I was having a sales conversation with someone, and he said, I would like to build $1 million business. It's not a question of, do you like to build $1 million business? It's a question of, are you going to build $1 million business? right? And if you're committed to it and you're willing to do whatever it takes to build that business, then you'll achieve that. But if you just would like to do something, then that's not a big enough driver. And that's why so many people get in these hamster wheels, believing they want something that they truly don't want. And so visualization just becomes a part of that. What you think about is what you can achieve. You could believe it to achieve it. And it's that simple.
Definitely. Do you reckon visualization's ever worked against you?
I think you can focus on the wrong thing. Absolutely. I think there's moments and there's dark moments that we all go through where we get caught up in a negative thought pattern. And, I don't know if people would describe it as visualization, but the thoughts that are in your mind, the belief patterns that you're running, oftentimes can take you down that wrong path. The other side of visualization that no one really talks about is that it is a double-edged sword, pretty much like anything. The very thing that's driving you forward is also adding to the guilt, the shame, the unworthiness, the undeserving, the I'm not there yet, right? And so it's this ebb and flow and this battle, understanding that you've got to have gratitude and appreciation in the moment, but you can't be content in a sense that, my life is everything I've ever wanted it if you want more, right? And there's nothing wrong with being content, being happy, saying this is what, for me, this is what I want. I've made it, and I'm happy now, and I don't need more. I don't want more. And it's strange because I think it's for me, life is about evolution. Life is about growth. Life is about expansion. And so I'm always driven, not necessarily to attain more in the sense of material beings, but to be more, right? Okay. And so that drives me. But at the same time, you've got to constantly remember, who am I today? What have I already achieved? You've got to celebrate the success. And I think that's where a lot of people, that visualization can get you in trouble, because you end up living in the future too often. And that's a big problem. If you're climbing a mountain, I've said this before, so for those of you who've heard it, I apologize, but the point is worth driving home. If you set out on a mountain, on a hike, right? And you look at the peak of the mountain, and let's say it's a 4-hour hike or something like that. If you focus on the peak of that mountain the entire time, you won't make it, because every time you look up, it just looks so far away. But if you know where you're going, you have the map, right? And then you're focused on what's the next step, and you just continuously move closer to that goal, you end up, arriving.
Exactly.
And you get to appreciate the journey along the way, versus what a lot of people do is they get fixated on that end point, and there's such a gap from where they want to be to where they are now that they're not able to enjoy that journey. And in fact, a lot of times they'll go the opposite direction.
Oh, exactly.
So that's one of the things that I think that people can with visualization. There is a point to be made that you can't live in that state, right? Sometimes thinking is a dangerous thing, because you'll tear down the ideas, you'll look for something else, you'll bail on it before you've ever got there because it's taking too long. And Gary Vaynerchuk said, I saw a video someone shared the other day, and I don't watch a lot of his videos, but I like what he's saying recently. And he said, he gets a lot of emails from entrepreneurs, people who have been at it for, 4-6 months doing a blog or doing videos, and, hey, things aren't working, and should I quit, or what should I do? And, his response is like, how dare you, right? You're going to spend your rest of your life. This is what you want to do for the rest of your life, and you expect to make it in the first 4-6 months. Like, the commitment is what's key. So you have that visualization, and you set those, outrageous goals. When I wanted to be the world record holder in powerlifting, that came. I walked into the gym to train with Brent Meixell in Spokane, Washington. I traveled 2 hours to get there from college. I walked in that gym. My best lifts at the time were okay for an amateur. My best squat was 450 pounds. And Brent looked at me and said, "What do you want to do in this sport?" And it was the first time anyone had asked me, "What do I want?" And I said, "I want to be a world record holder like you." You see, and it took a decade to get there, but I knew what I wanted. I set that I set that goal. I visualized that goal, and it was who I became to live into it. But, I knew what I wanted then. That didn't vary. That didn't change. I set out on the path, and it took a decade to get there, a decade of commitment, a decade of pain, a decade of suffering, a decade of sacrifices. But I knew what I wanted.
So what was the driver at that point?
I don't know. I've been asked that question before. I don't think you know why you want it. You just know you want it, right? And maybe you create associations to it. Maybe, over time, you have illusions around it. Like, I'll be famous, I'll be rich, I'll be this. Obviously, I was 19 when I was asked that question. So there was a lot of fickle and arbitrary things that, now I realize aren't important. But I think that it's one of those things. I don't think an athlete, I don't think a businessman, I don't think, any successful person could stand there and say, oh, this is what caused me to create the goal in the first place. I think the why, knowing your why you wanted it. For me, it was to prove to myself I could. It was to prove to myself I could, and to push myself to the boundaries, and to prove that I could achieve anything I wanted. And it was to be able to say, to look people in the face that said I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that, and say I did it. And I think everyone has an individual reason. As you grow and you gain knowledge and appreciation for life, it starts to become about your family and your loved ones. And for me, a lot of it is about leaving a bigger dent, than when I came in, and actually changing the trajectory of humanity. Because why not? Why not? Someone's got to do it. If not me, then who? So I think people's whys change, but I think that, when you set out, looking back, to when I set that goal at the time, it was because I had a lot of associations to what it would bring me. And in reality, it made me who I am today. And it gave me the opportunities I have today. And it didn't make me rich or famous. I was famous in my own little world, I guess. But at the end of the day, what it gave me was opportunity, more opportunity. And that's what happens. The doors open up for those that walk through the ones that present themselves early in life.
Okay. Something you mentioned also at the end of the last podcast was your constant, you basically said, what motivates you is the fact you're going to die. And people who are live streaming this will stay in the top right corner. I've got a countdown to my estimated death, and it's something that I like to do. I was wondering if you have anything like that reminds you of it, or there's any kind of memories or anything like that.
I don't necessarily have a countdown clock or anything like that. I've thought about doing that before, but every single morning I just remind myself of that. I've had close friends pass, and we talked about on the last podcast, and I don't hide from reality. I don't hide from reality. So I see people passing all the time. I see the reminders on Facebook when people have passed or go to a funeral or things like that. And I'm just very real about it. I'm very real, appreciative of the time I have, and realize that at the end of the day, that there's no guarantees, and so I'm trying to run as fast as possible, so to speak, and appreciate the things along the way, and get to where I believe I should be and what I can do. And so there's a lot of pressure. You put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that I think is the constant reminder. You wake up and it's like, okay, I got another day, let's go. And then you go to bed and you think at the end of the day, did I do everything I could today? And oftentimes I didn't. And that's what drives me the next day. And the next day is just that reminder that I am capable of more.
Is that what reconciles you?
I would say so. Yeah. I would say it's just a case of awareness, awareness of time wasted, awareness of not living up to your capabilities, or not living into the things that you can do. And I think that inner dialogue, that inner voice, is really your guiding force. And I think that most people, if they, began to tune into it, then we would really start to have that motivation, that internal motivation that they truly need. I think that a lot of people they don't hear because they're not listening. And, they say ignorance is bliss, and obviously sometimes that is the case. But I think that anyone who starts to begin to believe in themselves, starts to tune into that inner voice, starts to become in control, take control of their life, take extreme ownership, which I think a lot of people have benefited from over the last few years. But when you begin to do that, you feel the pressure. And so it doesn't get easier. The more you peel the onion, and it seems like the harder it gets. So you got to be willing to go through that. You've got to be willing to endure. And I think that, those that they achieve amazing things, and they make a difference in this world. And I think that the purpose of life, a lot of people are looking for the purpose of life, and in its simplest form, it's to reproduce. But if you look at that at a grander scale, it's to, to improve life and continue life. And so when you look at the world's problems, some people, their responsibility is immediately to their family, and some people feel called to serve the family of the world, to think of humanity as one place and one race, and that everyone is important to each other. And I think that's, when you start to tap into that drive, just gets bigger and bigger, to realize how blessed you truly are. There's people who still don't have clean water. There's people who don't have food every day. There's people who don't have, roofs over their heads, and they're still in that very basic survival state of consciousness. They don't know how long they've got. And, it seems fickle to be arguing over who's the president or how much taxes are, or, whether it's Women's Day or Black Rights Day or whatever. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those days, because I think they do raise awareness around issues, but it's just sad that in 2017, we still have to have a day to remind us of these things, that it's not just part of society now, and that we still have separation and segmentation, and people still believe that, they're better than someone else because of the genitalia they were born by, or the color they were born by, or where they were born in the world. And so I think each individual is called to a different standard, but when you start to elevate and you start to tap into, the higher consciousness, and the beautiful thing is technology is allowing more and more people to be able to do that, because of the access of information. These things right here, information highway, that stuff was in books, and before books was passed down from, scholars and things like that. And so we have an opportunity, and we're in a current beautiful place right now in the world where we can really shift. But of course, just like I said earlier, things are a double-edged sword. Virtual reality essentially could turn everyone into, just a brain, and remove the relationship to the body, because why do you need to go anywhere when you can have this experience just, being there? And I've put the headset on. We have a virtual reality unit here, and, you put that on, and it's hard to tell. Your brain cannot process what's real, what's not real. And yet you remind yourself, and you just get sucked in, and whoa, and it's unbelievable. And you've seen the adverts where people are responding. When you're at that level, movie theaters are going to go, travel is going to go. Why would you need to go sit on the beach if you can trick the brain into believing it's on vacation? But you start to lose the nutrients that come with those things. You lose the nutrition of moving. You lose the nutrition of the sunshine. You lose the nutrition of the connections with other people, the face-to-face connections, the emotions, the feelings. And so in reality, people were worried about, robots taking over the world. But if we get to a point where the only useful thing of a human is the brain, then there comes a point where maybe all we are doing is uploading our brain into an infrastructure that then is moving for us. So, just like earlier, everything's a double-edged sword. You just have to have the awareness, and you have to say, okay, what's the balance here? And I think we're in a very young stage. Internet, virtual reality, all of this stuff, that's just been in our lifetime. And so for some people, they went through this with the house phone and the things like that. And now, now we're getting to a point where, who knows what's in the future and what's coming. Technology grows so fast. But what it does is it gives us the ability to do more. And it gives us the ability to think bigger, think larger, and actually believe in that, because maybe the technology doesn't exist today, but at the rate it's growing, 5-10 years, who knows where it will be. So we can now go beyond even what is reality and say, this is a possibility. And I kind of have this weird concept that if we're able to think something, it's because it's possible. And that's why we've been able to get the inventions and things we had. Not everyone's going to have those thought processes, right? But somebody has those, and that's the spark, that's the ignition, and then we build upon that. And so, to say that it's impossible is just that is what's not real. To think anything is impossible is what's not real, because there is examples of miracles, right? They were called in the day, that are now breakthroughs. Every single day we're seeing the growth. Every single day we're seeing the impossible become possible. And so you're only limited by, number one, your own mind, right? And number two, your willingness to change. And if you can control that, and you can become aware of that, and you can start to condition, then you start to blow the ceiling off of your own limitations. And I think that that's what so many people, especially people, who are probably watching, listening to this podcast, like they're in that frame of mind. They know inside of them that there's more to give to the world. There's more for them. And the real thing is that they're the only issue, right? And so spirituality, what a lot of people get into, religion, all this stuff, and they want to argue about that stuff too. That's irrelevant. Spirituality is an internal journey in order to become more of who you are. And that's, for me, that's what I constantly focus on. I'm the bottleneck. How do I get out of my own way?
Yeah, I think it's just another tool to give you perspective. And I think that's something that you, along with a lot of like higher performers, demonstrate. I think it's also the baseline of a successful mindset to have perspective of your own thoughts. Have you always had that perspective, or is it something that there was a turning point, or is it something that's been accumulative?
I think that, I've always thought I was different growing up. And so I've always looked for answers. Like, why am I the weird kid? I was friends with the jocks and with the geeks. And I was friends, with the good looking and with those that at the time that necessarily would be considered, I was friends with everyone. And so I was always thought to myself that I was a little different. I always thought to myself, I was into different things than everybody. I would, I would have, I would say I want something and then I would do whatever it took to get it. And I noticed a lot of people didn't do that. I didn't see those limitations. And a lot of that goes down to, you got to credit my parents. They never handcuffed me or said I couldn't do anything. They kind of allowed me to think, and they gave me the ability to spread the wings, and they supported me where they could. But I think that as time's gone on, and still to this day, I'm constantly trying to learn more about myself. Right? Why do I do the things I do? And why do I react the way I react? And what is it really about? And because I have that constant search for knowledge, that constant search for growth, I can start to process things. And it doesn't mean they go away. I've always been an angry person. I've always been able to get triggered and go from 0 to 100 real quick. And what changed is I still go 0 to 100, but now I come back down to 0 at that same speed because I can recognize the feeling and the emotion, and I can process, okay, what is truly going on here, right? And it's changed my relationships. And look, people, if you're listening and you don't know my story, the thing is, it's easy to say, oh, well, you're where you're at now. But I went through a divorce and a broken engagement in order to be able to get to the marriage I'm at now, right? And so you got to be willing to go through the shit. So many people are scared to go through that. So many people are afraid of what they might reveal. But you have to go into the darkness. You have to be willing to embrace it. To be whole, you have to have dark and light, and you have to know and understand it. You can't suppress. Suppression is the biggest issue in this world. And so you've got to be willing to let that shit come up, and you've got to be willing to shake some things, and you got to be willing to leave the past in the past. And unfortunately, relationships can end, friendships can end, you can lose money, you can go bankrupt. These things happen. But the reality is you got to have the confidence that by moving through this, by going through the shit, on the other side is something even better. And that's something I've always had. I've always had that thought process that there is a better life ahead. And I think that, for some people, they just give up. They just give up. They say, I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of grinding. I'm tired of beating my head against the wall. I just surrender. And they just give up. And in a weird sense, maybe the universe, that's parcel of what it does. It tests us. It continuously tests us to see if we're willing to step up to the challenge, to see if we're deserving of the gifts and the success that can lay on the other side. And maybe it's just a buy-in. Just like if you're doing a workout and there's 100 burpees before you get into the snatch. That's a buy-in. The 100 burpees, they don't test anything except for, are you in good enough shape to get to the snatch, right? But maybe that's what life is about. It's these constant buy-ins to see if you can get to that quote-unquote next level, and it's the price you have to pay in order to continue to step up. And, you never meet a successful person who everyone might think they got there easily. You start listening to their story and they've gone through thick and thin and gone through hell to get there. So, I think you've just got to be willing to, and a friend of mine, Dallas Ladd, he was in a program with me, and he said to me one day, stop trying to hide from things and start looking at the world and saying, bring it the fuck on. Because the quicker you can bring shit on, the quicker you can deal with issues, the quicker you can smash fucking obstacles, the quicker you can move to that next level. So that's kind of the approach that I've taken on, and it served me well. And of course, some people probably disagree, but I'll continue doing what I do and proving people wrong. And if they can prove me wrong, fair play. I'm always open to learn and listen to others as well.
When you were going through hardship, what was your self-talk like at that point?
I think that that is something that I notice is different for me. I don't look at failure as failure. I look at it as a lesson. And so I constantly search for what the fuck happened. Right. And I bring in people and mentors and coaches. And that's something that When I went through my after my divorce and I was engaged, and when that ended, I looked at what the fuck happened here, and I took extreme ownership. What the fuck happened that I am in control of? I cannot control somebody else. I cannot control the actions of others. I can only control myself and my own actions. So what did I do that caused these situations? What did I do that created these issues? And if, when I find that, okay, how do I change that? How do I begin to remove that? How do I begin to switch that? You can't really get rid of habits. You can replace habits, right? So if there's a certain mindset, if there's a certain pattern, okay, I notice this pattern. How do I change that? And so that's really what I continuously do. Whenever anything hits the fan, whenever shit gets bad, I constantly am looking for that. And because of that, I'm able to extract the lesson learned, and then, okay, here's my new action plan. And I think that a lot of people want to wallow, they want to sit in it, they want to blame, and sometimes it's okay to feel that, to feel the sadness. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset, to be angry, but it's not okay to stay there, right? And there comes a time where you've just got to put your big boy pants on and just say, enough is enough. Let's figure out what the fuck happened, and let's not let it happen again. And that's something that I continuously do. I kind of try to think, okay, this happened. Let's not have it happen again. And when things crop up multiple times, right? And for those of you familiar with the hero's journey, if you're not, you should look it up. Joseph Campbell, there's a great movie called Finding Joe. It'll break it down for you, really easy. But in the hero's journey, you have your battles with your demons, right? That's what it is. You see this in every movie. You have the battle with the enemy, the battle with the demons. If you're continuously battling the same demons, you're not learning the lesson. You're not able to integrate back into the world. And if you can't get out of that cycle, you're going to compete. Your life is going to seem like this repeat of the same issues, the same problems. And what happens is those fucking issues get bigger and louder, right? And I see this with sports all the time. I see this with athletes all the time, right? They have a little injury, and they ignore it. And then they get a little bit of a bigger injury, and they ignore it. And then they pull something, and they ignore it. And then they blow something out, and they have to complete rupture, a complete tear, and then now they're fucking out, right? But the reality is, if you look at it, the fucking signs and signals were there like 8 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, people with back issues, right? The signs and symptoms were there. You just didn't pay attention. And so they got louder and louder and louder and louder, and they slap you. And that's why we see people, people who will, it seem like they fall from grace. The reality is they didn't fall from grace. There was warning signs and red flags all along the way, and they fucking ignored it. And now they're getting slapped down hard because it's the way, for some reason, it's the way to bring them back to balance. It's the way to put them back on the path they're supposed to be on. And most people don't pay attention to that. And so, when you go through those same things, if you notice something coming up for the second time or the third time, and you're not trying to figure out, what am I doing to cause this? You're doing yourself a disservice, and it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. And so you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. And a lot of the times you're too close to that situation to figure it out yourself. And that's why you got to find a mentor. That's why you got to find a coach. That's why you got to be around other like-minded people to realize, hey, I'm not alone in this journey. But I don't have the answers. What do you suggest? And when they suggest something, you fucking do it. You don't argue with them, because what you've been doing got you to where you're at. And so why not just fucking trust somebody else and just try something different? Prove them wrong if you do it and it doesn't work, but don't try to argue with them. And that was a lesson I learned moving to Westside. I remember Dave Tate. We had a conversation, and he kind of gave me the lay of land and what to expect, to really see if I was committed to going. One of the things he said to me is, don't fucking argue with Louis. Do not argue with Louis. Louis Simmons seems like a crazy old man. He doesn't make any fucking sense. And he'll tell you to do something, and you'll think to yourself, what the fuck? And he did many times. But I remembered that what Dave said. He said, the only thing he's trying to do is help you get stronger. He's not trying to hurt you. He's not trying to take you out. He's not trying to ruin your career. He's trying to make you stronger. His job is for you to get on that record board. And so I trusted Louis. And he told me a lot of crazy shit, didn't make any sense. I trusted him. And I trusted him, and I became the world record holder. I put my name on that record board. And, the documentary's coming out, Westside versus the World. So people are going to be able to see inside. But that's what most people do. They bring mentors into their life, right? And that's a part of the hero's journey too, is finding that right mentor, finding that guide. And then they choose to ignore the advice they're given. And it's baffles me, because at that point in time, you have to surrender, and you have to say, look, I don't care how many books I've read. I don't care how much experience I've had. This thing is happening over and over again. I'm just going to try something different. And when you do that and you just have blind faith and you believe in it, it's amazing what can happen. And too many people want to dig their heels in before they even start. And it's just, it's sad to see, but again, maybe it's just the way that things are tested, and maybe not everyone can make it to the top. Maybe not everyone's cut out for that. And maybe it's just a way of keeping things balanced. But, I'm not willing to be one of those people that falls to the sword. And so I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to encourage those who want to push too to come on that journey with me. And, I take my hat off to anyone who bows out and makes that decision and knows what they want, and they know that what they don't want, because that's just as powerful. But I'm going to keep running. So,
Who's the best mentor you've ever had, or most influential mentor?
Well, I've had a few. Obviously Louis Simmons was huge, and not just for the powerlifting. He taught me a lot about life and about the simplicity.
Do you remember any of those lessons?
So he was big into the Book of Five Rings and the lessons from the samurais and stuff. So I got into a lot of that stuff. But really just about being like a master of your craft and doing what makes you happy, cutting out all the shit, not being, one of the things he says he says, I don't need anyone else to tell me I'm good. I have all the self-confidence in the world. I don't need my dick stroked by somebody else. And, a lot of his lessons, taken out of context, the way he says them, but if you listen, he's actually a very, very, very intelligent man. And, there's a lot you can extract from there. So he taught me really how to live life and how to achieve and how to be great. He taught me how to be great and how a champion acts and what a champion should focus on and what they shouldn't focus on. And there was a lot, when I moved to Westside, I was doing seminars all around the world, and I thought I was hot shit. I was a top 10 lifter and things like that. Had sponsors, and I had my blog and I was putting videos out. And he basically said, "Who are you doing this for?" And I gave up all of that and just focused on being the best, and I became the best. And that's what you often see that, right? You often see the best in the world aren't necessarily the person who has the biggest social media following and things like that. And then when they become the best, boom, things can blow up for them. So, I learned a lot from Louis, and those lessons have served me well. And then I've invested in a lot of different mentors. I had a business partner, Yannick Silva. He was a huge mentor of mine about, what's important in business, about how it's not about the money. It's about the people too. And, now that's labeled under what is it, conscious business or something like that. But he has his book, Evolved Enterprise, which is a phenomenal book that kind of goes into that about how, business is there so that you can serve other people. It serves you, but you're there to serve other people. And that was that's been a huge thing to me, and kind of, figuring out how to play more and enjoy the journey. He taught me a lot there. And then Kevin Nations has been a huge influence and mentor to me, about just how to be in alignment and be in integrity with who you are, and continuously looking at yourself when things are going on and saying, how am I causing that issue? He's been a huge influence on taking extreme ownership over my own life. And obviously, the book by Jocko was a good reminder of that. So he's been a big influence. And then Garrett J. White, with his warrior movement, has been a huge influence on me on just kind of, continuously figuring out how to actually be a man in today's world, and how to truly, what I've learned from Garrett is how to accept who I am, and just be willing to embrace that fully and not be worried about what other people think and what other people are going to say. Because like I said earlier, I've always been different. I've always felt I'm different. And sometimes you can hold yourself back out of fear of what others are going to say. And, especially when you go through, relationships the way I was going through relationships, and the pain you cause other people, you start to wonder, well, maybe I should just be a regular person. Maybe I should give up on some of this stuff. Maybe I should, hold back because I seem to be upsetting other people. And, he's been huge and influential in the sense of just, no, you're fucking AJ Roberts. Like, own that shit. You don't need to understand why you're that person, but own that shit, embrace it, and fucking live into it. And so, again, been huge. And I have a lot of different mentors. We could go on all day, but, those four men have been huge influences in my life. And then, my mother continues to be a mentor to me to this day. She's amazing. And, she's an amazing, a scholar, and she works with parents on parenting now, mainly because I was a terrible child. I think I forced her into figuring out how to be a good parent. But she continues to teach me things today, and I teach her as well. So we have a great relationship. So if I had to pick 5, those would be the 5.
What do you reckon the commonalities between them are?
I would say that they're just abundance mindset. You know, they all have a positive outlook on life. They all want the best for other people, and they all have the ability to see the greatness in other people and have the faith in humanity. You know, in that you're going to do the right thing, and that you're in heart's in the right place. So they all have very different practices and teach very differently. But I would say that the reality is that they're constantly growing, and they're always students of themselves, and that they're able to. They don't have any delusion on who they are. They know who they are. And they're constantly growing and working on that as well. And so I think that brings the humble attitude, and gives them the ability to just tell the truth and to cut through the bullshit and just, let's look at reality here. So I don't know if any of them would say that they are, but I would say they all have very stoic personalities. Yeah.
Do you read into Stoicism a lot?
I had no idea what it was really until Ryan Holiday started putting out his.
Me too.
So he's been a big influence in that. But it's funny, I read a lot of things. I'm like, oh, okay, because you come to these conclusions on your own, and this is the beautiful thing, right? The beautiful thing about life is you can struggle on your own for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But if you're constantly searching for the answers, you'll eventually get them. But there's ways to shortcut that. So, it's interesting. Just kind of like the sports psychology, when they started studying me, I started learning things, and I was already doing it. But then I was able to, okay, I'm doing this already. How do I control this, right? And that's the key. Like you might do things naturally, but when you have the awareness, oh, this is what I'm doing, now you can control it. When you can control it, you can practice. And when you can practice, you can grow. And that's, I think, what most people don't realize is when you think about the physical fitness and you think about training the body, you're putting hours a day training the body. But I tell someone, hey, you should meditate. So I don't have 10 minutes to meditate. I said, but you have 2 fucking hours to go to the goddamn gym? Do you see how fucking crazy you are right now? They work for 8 hours a day, and they say, oh, I don't have time to take my wife out on a date night. I don't have time to spend time with my friend. It's crazy. And it's not about balancing the even amount of hours, but it's are you taking the time to improve those things? Because there's no point having great fitness and having an empty bank account and no relationships, right? Just like there's no point having an amazing relationship, but being being 400 pounds and going to die young because, you didn't take care of yourself. You got to have balance in the sense that, am I growing in all areas? If I have a shitty relationship, well, it's probably because you don't know anything about relationships. When was the last time you read a book on how to be a good friend or how to be a good husband or how to be a good wife? I talk to a lot of business owners, and they want to know, what's your best business book? What's this? I'll go read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Go read the 4 love language, the love languages, 5 love languages. Go read the 4 agreements. And they look at me like I'm fucking crazy. And I give unconventional coaching. I just told one of my guys last week, he reached out to me looking for a life raft. I said, bro, go for a 2-hour walk without your cell phone. And he was pissed. He wanted me to give him a tool or a strategy. What I told him to do was go for a walk for 2 hours. And what he learned on that walk was he was addicted to his cell phone. He was wasting time throughout the day. And that's why he was in the situation he was at, because he had been procrastinating. He'd been screwing off. He'd been wasting his time. But I didn't tell him that. I allowed him to find that answer. But you got to create that balance across the board. And you got to say, okay, you got to realize that life is life. It's not segmented. It's not separated. It's one thing. And so if one thing's out of whack, everything's out of whack. You can't ignore it. You can, but eventually it comes crumbling down, like I said, and those signals, those warning signs get louder and louder. So, it's an interesting journey to be on, and I don't think I got it figured out yet. I just think I got it figured out a little better than some.
On the subject of journeys, what do you think has been your most helpful failure? And feel free to pass if you want to move on.
No, I mean, that's a great question. I think that for me, honestly, I think the biggest thing for me is I spent a lot of time doing shadow jobs, right? And Stephen Pressfield talks about this in his book, The War of Art, and Turning Pro. Those two books are phenomenal. But I spent a lot of time in shadow jobs, right? Trying to align with people who had the same vision as me and help build their business without taking the risks myself, right? And I did this on a monumental scale several times and helped build incredible businesses that hit the 7-figure mark. You know, businesses that one of the companies that I was running, we did 10.4 million in 8 months. You know, and I got to be a part of that, but I didn't own that. It wasn't mine. And I, realized you're building someone else's wealth, but also that their vision. If they're majority owner or they're the CEO and you have a different role. Then at the end of the day, their vision and what they want, that's what comes through. And so I think huge, right? I think absolutely huge. And, my goal has been to build $100 million company in revenue, not valuation, in revenue. And I aligned with people who I thought wanted the same thing. And, when push came to the shove, we had different visions. We had different thought processes on what needed to be done. And so we weren't able to align with each other. We could agree that we both wanted the same thing, but we weren't able to align with each other. And because of that, I go, this isn't my company. I'm fighting for things that I don't have a right to fight for because, I'm a partner, I'm this, I'm that, but the reality is it's not mine. It's not my baby. And so, finally letting go of all of that and just going off on my own and saying, okay, I'm going to build this and I'm going to build it my way. And just taking ownership over that the reality is that nobody else is going to make you rich. Nobody else is going to make you happy. Nobody else is responsible for loving you. These are all personal responsibilities. And anytime you're looking for that in somebody else, you're setting yourself up to fail. So I would say that's been my biggest lesson. And it took me 3 partnerships to do that. I'm very fortunate that I'm still friends with those partners and that we exited on good terms. Basically, I just realized that this wasn't the right place for me. But I see this happening all the time. People are delusional about what they want, what they need to do. And when you step back and you're honest about it and start taking that responsibility, then you can actually control your life and you can begin to make huge shifts. And you'll be surprised how fast it happens. There's no such thing as an overnight success. But most of the overnight successes, you notice, are on the back of a lot of mistakes. And they finally figure it out. And so I feel like I finally figured it out in a sense of building my own and being out on my own and that. And obviously, you have to humble yourself and you have to go backwards. I think that's a big issue. And the lesson that I've learned is that when you're running a company as big as I was running with Marketing Genesis, you have a team. You have a big team. You have 30, 40, 50 employees and team members, and you get a lot done. When you go out on your own, you got to be willing to roll up the sleeves and start shoveling that shit again. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And I think that that's a big issue in life. That's where people get stuck. They get comfortable, and getting uncomfortable is a scary thing. And it's something you have to do all the time. You have to face those fears. And so sometimes it's doing unconventional things to face those fears. But it's not necessarily just, doing the work. It might be jumping out of an airplane. It might be lying in a pit of snakes, going on Fear Factor or some shit like that. But the truth is that you've got to be okay being uncomfortable. And you've got to be willing to do that. If you know inside, if you feel cool to do something greater and you keep ignoring it, it doesn't go away. It just gets louder and it makes you even more miserable. And so on the outside, everyone can think you're happy. On the outside, your life might look great. But if you know inside you're not aligned with your calling, with your purpose, then that will tear you up more than anything else. And that will cause more unhappiness. And eventually you will sabotage everything because it's not where you want to be. I've done it myself. I know what it feels like. It's not fun. I don't wish that on anyone. Some people need to go through it in order to be able to see it. But the reality is that we're each given those opportunities and those times. And if we can get ahead, and that's why I say lean on shoulders of giants, because they can learn. You can learn a lot. Now, I moved into a new neighborhood here in Las Vegas, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. And a lot of people you would imagine would be driving, sports cars and lavish lifestyles based on the homes here. The reality is most people are driving around in a normal SUV, Lexus or something like that. And I've yet to see a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or any of the other expensive cars. And then I was reading a report the other day about who actually spends the money in the luxury industry, and the majority of people spending money are people who are making less than 100 grand. So they're the ones buying Louis Vuitton, they're the ones doing that. So you start to learn a lot of wealth lessons by that, right? And so you can, if you have those desires, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to get the watch, I'm going to get the Ferrari, but eventually you're going to give it all up. So you can save yourself a lot of headache if you just start surrounding yourself. And like I said, I've been very fortunate of having amazing mentors and being able to afford to travel the world and go to different places, go to Necker Island, meet Richard Branson, hang out with John Paul Jr., who owns, Paul Mitchell and Patron, and be around billionaires. But the beautiful thing is those billionaires have books and like other things, interviews on YouTube. Like I said, we live in a world now you can tap into a mastermind without ever having to leave your home. And so nothing beats being there in person. Right? Nothing beats getting the attention. But if you're struggling and you don't know what to do, man, the resources are out there. You don't have excuses. People don't have fucking excuses anymore. They want to say they do, but they don't.
Yeah, I think part of the barrier is that people want it to come in this kind of magic format, but it's so simplistic and so easy to implement. They just don't want to believe that it's like with the mindset stuff, like counting your wins is huge and all that kind of stuff. And people just don't seem to respect it because it's not complicated.
Well, that's a big fucking secret. There's no secret, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what fucking people can't understand is it is that simple. But you have to be. So it's like, wait, I love being in the fitness industry and working with fitness entrepreneurs because it's amazing what you see, right? And everyone's guilty of this, that they don't see a lesson and apply it to their whole life. Right? They think it's contained to one area. So example, in the weight loss industry, right? We laugh at weight loss pills, right? We just go, oh my gosh, this is just ridiculous. And we see the marketing for it. We see the hype and the hoopla. And these companies make millions of dollars on people who want to take a pill that they think is going to fix their problem. But let's shift over to a relationship. Someone has relationship issues. They literally want to fix it overnight, right? Like, I've been an asshole for 10 years to my wife and she wants to leave me, but I want my dick sucked, right? Or like my business, like I'm not getting results from my clients and my business is bleeding and I need like 30 clients this month to keep my doors open. It's like the parallels are so hilarious to see people who, and they know better, but for some reason, it's right in front of their face. They just can't see it. And they need someone else to point it out. But, you want to get in shape and you got a lot of weight to lose. You got to give yourself, 6 months, 3 months, whatever. Like, based on where you're at, like when you get out of shape, right? You know what you need to do. You know the time frame it's going to take. And we're willing to invest that. But when it comes to other things, we're not willing to put that time in. We expect instant results, and we get in that same mindset and we make the same mistakes that we see those people make, and, throwing their money away on get rich quick, throwing their money away on lose weight overnight, throwing the money away on, stop divorced instantly. Just the bullshit that sells, right? When you get into the game, you've got to understand that's a part of the game, but you can't fall victim to the game. And that's so many people fall victim to the game. You gotta be aware of what's going on at all times. It doesn't mean you can't be involved. It doesn't mean you can't learn from it. It doesn't mean you can't go to something and say, okay, what are they doing? What is the lesson? And how are they doing it? But you've got to be aware of it. And I think so many people, for some reason, it's like they'll laugh at someone who buys a weight loss pill, but then they go buy the, how to get 30 members overnight with a Facebook ad. It baffles me. It baffles me, but it's the world we live in, unfortunately. And hopefully people begin to wake up a little bit. And I think we are seeing more and more people, because of podcasts like this and other resources that are out there, people are beginning to smarten up, and that's all it really is just education level. People just they don't know what they don't know. And so they just need resources and access to that. And now more than ever, I think we'll see the education system crumble in our lifetime, simply because it's so outdated. You've got my nephew knows how to use an iPad way better than I do, and he's, I think, 5, 6. So, you got kids that smart already, who know how to search, who know how to do stuff. And, it's unbelievable what they can do. The current education system is not set up for that. So we'll see that crumble, and that hopefully will be a change. And we might see the government crumble the way it's going with, Brexit in England and Trump over here. Or we may see it as a catalyst for positive and big change. Either way, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. It doesn't really affect me on a day-to-day. So, honestly, that's a fascinating point. The fact that you're just going to keep on doing your shit because you're not worrying about the rest of stuff because it's frankly irrelevant to you. Yeah, and the beautiful thing is if you've got a passport, you can go anywhere in the world pretty much, you know. Yeah, there are some regulations. I understand that, and some things that sometimes put in place where you can't go here, you can't go there. Like we couldn't, you know, if you lived in America, you couldn't go to Cuba for an hour, and that's lifted. Obviously, we've got what's going on with the countries not being allowed over here, and we're seeing the backlash of that. But the reality is that no matter what happens, you're a citizen of the world, and if you really want to go somewhere else, you can. And there's opportunity. There's countries who are begging for entrepreneurs. There's countries who are begging for good people. And if you're a good person and you're able to, you know, create financial stability and do your own thing, man, there's countries begging for you to go there because they don't have that. And so, you know, whether it's Costa Rica, or whether it's, you know, Puerto Rico, whether it's Thailand, you know, there's all these abilities. And Europe, you know, there's different countries you can go to. So, you know, we don't live in an era where if you want to go travel, you're going to be gone for, you know, months on end on a ship. And when you get there, you don't know if you're going to get attacked or whatever. We live in a country, we live in a world to this day that we have the ability to travel, to go to different places. The only reason we don't is our attachments, our beliefs, our excuses. And so if we can just set those aside, we realize that no matter what really happens over here, you know, maybe Trump ruins the whole country and the economy crashes. Well, guess what? I'm just going to pack my bags up and, you know, I might come back to England. I might go somewhere else. I might go and find an island somewhere like Richard Branson did. But the reality is that, you know, it takes a lot to screw up the world. And, you know, one country, one man, you know, just it doesn't have much of an influence on me directly.
Exactly. Which thinkers these days do you follow?
No, I'm a big fan of Peter Diamandis. I think he's done some amazing things with his X Prize. You know, I love his book Abundance and his book Bold. I think he's doing some great stuff. I have a friend, Roger Hamilton. He lives in Bali, and he does a lot of amazing things. And he's very, very good at analyzing, you know, success and different people and things like that. So you know, him, and of course, you know, Richard, I'm always paying attention to his views. You know, out of everyone I've ever met, I think that, you know, that guy's got it figured out the most. He understands how to live life. He understands the purpose, and you know, doing the things he's doing. And you know, I love to stay tuned in. So those are the three that thought leaders that you know, are up there. Elon Musk. Fascinated by that guy. He's either going to be a huge success or a huge failure. Either way, it's fun watching the journey and his confidence. Just seeing what he did with Australia right now. You know, they're having all those outages, power outages out there, and he had 25 mil. He said he'll fix the problem and be able to do it. It gave a time frame, I think 30 days. If he can do it in 30 days, it'd be free. And, you know, that him and the prime minister or whoever is in charge over there going back and forth on Twitter of all places. That's where they're, you know, this is where serious business deals are being done. 25 million done over Twitter. But you know, people like that, that's the people I like to follow.
Yeah.
Because they're smashing the boundaries and the barriers. And you know, people want to laugh about mining, you know, asteroids and cars that drive themselves and, you know, all this different stuff. People just don't think it's coming. And I think it's coming quicker than anyone can imagine. And people are going to be kind of left scratching their head here. And they're going to be forced to adapt. They're going to be forced to go into that. But, you know, 150 years ago, there wasn't cars on the road. So the fact that we've already gone through that cycle and they're going to be, you know, not extinct, but we're going back to being basically, you know, moved around. Before it was horse and carriage, right? That's how you got around. You weren't driving. And we're going back to that. You know, the world seems to change, but does it really? And, you know, the fact that we've only been able to move ourselves around with a vehicle for less than 150 years, you know, it goes to show what else do we have now that we could do away with? Laptops, computers, websites, you know, social media, who knows? And so you have to just be open to that stuff, and you got to keep your ear to the ground. You know, it's fascinating to me that we still live in an era where, you know, fitness professionals they don't understand the body as a whole. You know, they understand the muscles and they understand maybe digesting with the nutrition, but they don't understand mindset. They don't understand hormones. They don't understand, you know, get woo-woo here, but they don't understand, you know, the blood flow restriction and chakras. And like, there's so much that people don't know, and we're fragmented. You know, the industry is fragmented, and we see that in all industries. Everything's fragmented. when we begin to understand that, hey, the body is one thing and all of this flows together, and we probably, it's not a question of do we need a massage or do we need a chiropractor. It's a question of like, how do we get the best tissue quality? How do we get the best, ligaments and tendons and nerves, and it's one thing. But we're seeing, because of technology, because of the internet, because of the intelligence that people are gaining, because of the ability to be connected at a much greater level, we're seeing these things fast be adopted, and we're starting to see, it just in the fitness industry, trainers who, now they understand, if my client isn't getting, a good night's sleep, doesn't matter what I fucking do for the 1 hour that I'm with them. So, okay, we're only here for an hour, but there's 24 hours in a day, and I better figure out how to be there 24 hours a day with them. And whether that's slapping on a wearable so I can see what they do throughout the day, whether that's getting them to track their food in MyFitnessPal, whether that's, getting them hooked up with, heart rate monitors and all different stuff. There's different levels, obviously. And when you get really good, you don't necessarily need all of that, because you can tell because you have the knowledge, right? But it's about integrating things together. And I think that these thought leaders that I mentioned, that's something that they do better than anybody else. They figure out, how do we integrate the things versus how do we say that we're better than this or better than that? How do we bring it all together? And I think that's the way forward. I think that's what makes the world change. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more people doing, is figuring that stuff out. You go to a chiropractor, you get an x-ray and it shows you how messed up your spine is. You go into a gym, they don't get you on a machine and show you how much fat you have. They ask you, how much weight do you want to lose? And I'd like to lose 30 pounds. But that's arbitrary. How the fuck do you know how much weight you've got to lose? And those are the kind of things that not everyone can afford a machine that does that, right? But if you're not taking basic measurements, if you're not doing things like that, it's an arbitrary conversation. And so we're seeing these things change rapidly. It's just whether people adopt them. Those that adopt them, I think the people who adopt them the fastest, the people who are willing to change, to embrace new things, to put new things into their facilities, to understand that the fitness is not about being strong or having big muscles. It's about longevity and understanding what health and fitness really is. It's not a competition. It's not a sport. It's about energy and mental acuteness and the ability to do things. That's when we start to see everything else start to raise as well. Because I don't know about you, but for me, all my power, all my clarity, everything comes through the physical and learning the mind-body connection. The more I go deeper on that, the more I see why the things in my life are the way they are. And I think that the people I follow, the people I admire, they understand that too. And so you see them in those areas as well as business. You see them in the health field, you see them in the fitness and the mind and things like that. So, that would roundabout way of answering your question.
No, that was awesome. I think you touched on a really good point there, especially about the physiological influences of psychology. I think that's huge. And is there anything you think is really underrated in terms of mindset training?
Underrated. I think just people don't understand they need silence. And meditation, people have connotations around it. And they don't understand that you can be in a meditative state while you're driving. You can be in a meditative state while you're walking. You hear people say, I come up with my biggest ideas when I'm in the shower. But it's about presence, and it's about silence. And I think so many people are uncomfortable in silence. But I think silence is actually the most underused thing. Everyone is so connected that the minute they're alone, they're on Facebook or Instagram, and they're addicted to sedation of presence. And this is why video games, it's why Netflix, it's why apps like social media apps, it's why these things are so popular. Is because, and most people, maybe someone will argue with me with this, but I don't really care. My thought process is this: that as humans, we seek presence, and presence is living in the now, right? And when we drink, when we go on apps, when we play video games, when we, do whatever, we forget about the past and the future. For that moment, maybe even just watching sports, right? You see people, they spend 4 hours watching an NFL football game. They spend hours watching a soccer game. They will spend hours watching basketball, and they'll have passes sports is on almost every night now because people can't make it through the week without them. Just like church, you can go to church almost every night because people can't get through the week without going to church every day, right? So the reason for that is that in those moments, people are present. right? But they're not present with themselves. They're just ignoring everything. And so it's a sedation of actual facing reality, right? And they create a false reality, right? And a false happiness. But the minute you take that away, they're thrown back into the unhappiness, right? But if people just spent a lot of time with who they are, learning to love themselves, learning to be alone with their thoughts, to process, most of their answers, most of the things they seek, they would get. But again, it goes back to, it seems so simple that most people just aren't willing to meditate, and that's why we're seeing this movement of plant-based food, plant-based medicine take off, because essentially it's a hack, right? And it's a hack that's been used for centuries by monks and by kings and churches and things like that. But you're seeing, psychedelics becoming a huge thing in Silicon Valley and with experts and the book Stealing Fire that just came out goes into this, right? Navy SEALs are doing this stuff, but you're seeing, nootropics is taking off because it's the legal version, so to speak, but you're seeing people understand that they need to get into these states. And not everyone has, I think they say it takes, 21 days, 30 days, like it takes a long time, maybe 6 weeks even, to hit the right state in meditation, you see. And so people are getting into this plant-based, mushrooms and ayahuasca and iboga and all this other stuff. And I probably pronounced half of that wrong, but you see that because it's a hack, but it's getting people to go back to that, to the core of who they truly are. And I think that that's what people need to do. They need to reconnect with themselves. And that's something that I'm constantly trying to do, is reconnect with myself, rebuild the relationships that I have with myself, with food, with exercise, with just, who I am as a person. I think that's the most underutilized mindset. Everybody wants tools and tactics, right? But the reality is when you're in flow, the answers are there, and you're not, when you're in flow and you're playing sports, and for those of you who haven't played sports, you may not have experienced this, but when you're in flow, when I was playing basketball and playing for England, and then when I was, powerlifting and after I broke the world record, you don't have to ask many questions. You don't need a playbook. You just know what to do. And, this year when you saw, Tom Brady come back from the biggest, being behind by the most ever in a game and come back the way they came back, I guarantee you he wasn't looking at the playbook. I guarantee you he knew what he needed to do, and it just channeled through him. And yeah, he might have looked at the playbook for his things, but each play, each down, he felt what was right. He knew what was right. And that comes down to experience, but it also comes down to being in tune with who you are. And when you know who you are, that's where confidence, that's where clarity, that's where all the answers come from. You don't need external validation. You don't need external motivation. You don't need external advice. You just know what you do. And then you go seek those people out who can shortcut it because they know the things you don't know. And that's what's magical. And I think that it's so simple that's why most people just 10 minutes a day in meditation can change someone's life, but they don't get there in the first week and they throw their hands up and they quit, So I would say that's probably just being in silence and, no technology, none of that. I think just being disconnected is the answer.
Oh man, I could go on about this for hours and listen to you as well. It's awesome. One last question. What do you think are the components of a successful mindset?
I think first and foremost is gratitude. I think that you have to have the gratitude for where you're at. I think that too many people, the reason then they're not successful is because they focus on what they don't have versus focusing on what they do have. And they forget how powerful they are. They forget the things they have achieved. And so regardless, they're in this scarcity mindset. They operate from fear. And I think that that's a very tough place to get out of, right? And if you look at it like this, if I wanted to make a decision, right, and the answer is just to try and see if it works or not try, right? If I try and see if it works, I get the emotions of joy, happiness, momentum. There's fear, but actually it's courage, right? It transforms. So if I take action, I get all of these positives. Now, if I mentally cripple myself, I get guilt, shame, fear, anger, frustration, right? And so you can see how it's about the mini victories along the way, right? And so I was always on a winning team, right? And so, and this actually may have contributed, I'd say this probably contributed to my mindset more than anything. I always experienced success. And then we would have a loss and we would look at it and we'd say, okay, what happened? And we would move forward, right? Championship teams aren't built without losses, but you got to win more games than you lose to be a champion. But if I was on a team that lost every week, can you imagine the mindset that you go in? You imagine the difference, right? And some people have been fighting that their whole life, fighting their parents, tell them they can't do that, fighting it. So that's number one is just a gratitude to understand, okay, how far have we come? And then you go, wow, you have a lot of appreciation for that. Then I'd say another thing for the successful mindset is you got to be willing to embrace the suck, and you've got to be willing to really take on challenges. You can't be scared of it, right? Fear is just excitement in disguise. And you've got to be, you can be scared, but you go, you know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's really where courage is built. And when courage is built, confidence is built, and what you can do gets bigger. So it's about just making that decision. You know what? I'm terrified, but fuck it. I'm going to do it anyway. Delayed gratification. That's another big thing, right? You can't expect results overnight. So you've got to be willing to before you get to that next level, before you get that next breakthrough, before you achieve what you got to be committed to it. And you got to have that delayed gratification that, I want this more than I want anything else. So I'm okay with what happens in between. And I'll just leave it with those three because I think that we could go on all day. Yeah. And the topic's been covered by other people, but better than me. But for me, I would say it's that. That's
awesome.
Yeah, it's those three things, and that have had a huge impact for me. But I also think that I've been lucky. I think that the reason I've been lucky is I put myself in situations to be lucky, and I think that's. I'll end it on that point that. When opportunity comes knocking, you got to be willing to take the opportunity. You can't be sitting around waiting for a bigger opportunity, right? And there's a funny story. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but a guy's boat sinks in the ocean, and he's a religious man. He's sitting there. Sorry if anyone's listening, they're religious, but he's sitting there, and a piece of wood drifts by, and he ignores it because he says God's going to save him, and then a little one of those round rubber dinghy things floats on by, and he doesn't swim over to it because, again, God's going to save him. Little fisherman comes by in his boat, offers him a ride. He says, no, I'm good. God's going to save me. And this continues on, and eventually he drowns, and he gets to the pearly gates, and he says to God, I thought you were going to come save me. And God says, how many fucking clues do you need? Right? And so I think it's a funny joke, but I think the lesson there is that so many times we get opportunities, so many times things present them, so many times we have an idea, we have a spark of inspiration, and we don't take action. And I think that the key is that imperfect action, and you take imperfect action and you take those opportunities and you move forward. And I think that so many people are waiting for the bigger opportunity, waiting for the better thing to come along, that they just spend their whole life waiting.
No, man, that is perfect. That's a perfect place to end the show. There's so many points throughout that I am definitely including in the book, and so many quotes as well. I've been scribbling away, so that's really, really good. Where can people find out a bit more about you?
Yeah, best place is even my website, ajroberts.com, or facebook.com ajroberts.
Perfect. Succinct and neat. So that was a pretty fucking awesome show. I think you'd agree. As ever, AJ just kind of blows me away with the amount of knowledge he has and the passion of what... Well, you've listened to the show. You understand this. What I'd say is if you enjoy the show, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, kind of all that kind of stand shit that I always go on about. And also, don't forget to head on over to Amazon and grab your copy of Intensity Tolerance or The Impossible Art of Consistency by myself. You can just Amazon search for Tom Foxley and you should find it there. So I'll see you again soon for another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast.